Here's something that might surprise you. That aluminum can sitting in your refrigerator right now started its life as a massive aluminum ingot, a slab weighing up to 30,000 pounds and measuring over 30 inches thick. And the journey from that giant block to the paper-thin sheet you're holding, that all happens right here at Kaiser Aluminum's Warwick operations in Newburgh, Indiana, one of the most sophisticated aluminum rolling facilities in the entire world. The process begins with hot rolling. Those enormous ingots are fed into a reversing hot mill, where the rolls, under enormous pressure, squeeze the aluminum back and forth, gradually reducing its thickness from over 30 inches down to about 1 inch. The aluminum is still very hot at this stage, which makes it malleable and easier to work. The hot mill at Warwick can exert rolling forces exceeding 5,000 tons, and the ingot gets longer with every pass, like rolling out pie dough, only on an industrial scale. After hot rolling, the coil moves to the cold rolling mills, where the aluminum is rolled at room temperature to achieve the final thickness for beverage can sheet. That's an incredibly precise 0.01, 0 to 0.012 inches, or about the thickness of 2 human hairs side by side. Cold rolling also work hardens the aluminum, giving it the strength needed to hold pressure inside a carbonated beverage can. The finished coils, some weighing over 20,000 pounds, are then shipped to can manufacturers, where they'll be stamped, drawn, and ironed into the billions of cans Americans use every single year. Today, we're stepping into the heart of one of North America's most impressive steelmaking facilities, Iveco Rolling Mills, located in L'Orignal, Ontario, Canada. And trust me, once you see what goes on inside this place, you'll never look at a steel wire the same way again. It all starts with raw steel scrap, the kind of recycled metal that gets melted down in massive electric arc furnaces, reaching temperatures of over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That molten steel is then poured and continuously cast into billets, those long, square-section steel bars that are the building blocks of everything that follows. Each billet typically measures about 5.5 inches square and can weigh several hundred pounds. These are the starting point. Now here's where the magic really begins. Those billets get reheated in a walking beam furnace, a marvel of industrial engineering that slowly walks each billet through a controlled heat zone, bringing the steel back up to rolling temperature, around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Why reheat? Because steel at that temperature becomes workable, almost like very stiff dough, allowing the rolling mill to shape it without cracking. From there, the billet enters the roughing mill, a series of powerful rolling stands that progressively squeeze and elongate the steel. Each pass reduces the cross-section and increases the length. We're talking about a piece of steel that starts thick and square, being transformed pass by pass into a long, round rod. The process continues through intermediate rolling stands and finally through the finishing block, a high-speed rotating assembly that delivers the wire rod at its final diameter, typically between 5.5 millimeters and 20 millimeters. At the exit, the wire rod is traveling at speeds up to 100 meters per second. That's roughly 220 miles per hour, and it's coiled by a laying head, which loops the rod into neat rings before it lands on a Stellmore conveyor for controlled air cooling. That cooling rate determines the final mechanical properties of the steel. Slow it down, you get a softer wire. Speed it up, you get higher strength. The finished coils are then collected, weighed, tagged, and shipped to customers around the world, where they become springs, fasteners, cables, and reinforcing materials used in everything from bridges to your car's engine. Iveco has been doing this for decades, and watching it run in full production is nothing short of breathtaking. What you're watching right now is heavy-duty milling on a scale most people have never seen up close. This metal workpiece measures a full 1.2 by 2 meters. That's roughly 4 by 6.5 feet of solid metal sitting on a massive machining table. And the machine doing the work? That's a gantry-style CNC milling machine, the kind built specifically for large-format industrial components. The cutting tool you see there is a face mill loaded with carbide inserts, each insert engineered to withstand extreme heat and pressure. With each pass, the spindle removes layer after layer of metal with remarkable precision. We're talking about material removal rates that can exceed 50 cubic inches per minute on a roughing pass like this. What makes this kind of machining so impressive is the sheer rigidity required. The workpiece is clamped down with enormous force. The machine bed is built from cast iron or welded steel, sometimes weighing 50 to 100 tons, just to eliminate vibration. Because at this scale, even a tiny vibration means a flawed surface finish or a broken tool. This is the kind of work that goes into building molds for ship propellers, bases for turbine generators, and structural components for aerospace. Every pass brings this massive block one step closer to a precision part, and that's something truly worth stopping to appreciate. What you're watching here is a beautiful example of how far automated manufacturing has come. NIDE's motor assembly line represents the kind of precision and repeatability that would have seemed like science fiction just a generation ago. Let's start at the beginning of this process. That robotic arm is handling the stator core, which is the stationary part of the electric motor. Now, inserting copper windings into a stator used to be a skilled manual operation requiring patience and steady hands. Notice how this automated needle winding system feeds wire through each slot with perfect tension and placement. The robot positions the stator, and specialized needles insert and form the windings in a choreographed sequence that takes seconds per coil. Moving down the line, you're seeing the rotor assembly station. The rotor shaft, lamination stack, and end rings must align within tolerances measured in hundredths of a millimeter. The vision system you see mounted above uses high-resolution cameras to verify positioning before the hydraulic press seats everything together. If something's off by even a fraction, the system stops and alerts the operator. Here's what's particularly clever about NIDE's approach. Each motor is being built with its own digital record. As components move through assembly, sensors and cameras are documenting measurements, verifying torque values on every fastener, and tracking which specific parts went into which motor. The balancing station you're seeing now is critical. Even a slight imbalance in the rotor causes vibration, noise, and premature bearing wear. The machine spins the rotor, measures vibration, calculates exactly where to remove tiny amounts of material, and then precisely mills those correction points. The final automated testing station energizes each motor, measures current draw, checks rotation, and verifies performance specifications. Any motor that doesn't meet parameters gets flagged for manual inspection. This level of automation doesn't eliminate skilled workers. It elevates them to oversight and problem-solving roles while ensuring every motor meets exacting standards. Step into a glass-blowing studio, and you're stepping back in time, yet witnessing a craft that remains fundamentally unchanged for over 2,000 years. What you're watching is pure artistry meeting precise technical skill, and it never gets old. The process begins at the furnace, where glass batch, a carefully formulated mixture of silica sand, soda ash, and limestone, melts at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The glowing orange mash you see has the consistency of honey at this temperature. The glass blower dips a hollow steel pipe, called a blowpipe, into this molten glass and gathers a gob onto the end. This is where experience counts. Too little glass and your piece will be too thin. Too much, and it becomes unworkable. Notice how the craftsman constantly rotates the pipe. This isn't just showmanship. Gravity is always trying to pull that molten glass downward, and continuous rotation keeps it centered and symmetrical. It's the same principle that keeps a pizza dough round when you spin it. The actual blowing begins with gentle, steady breaths through the pipe, creating a bubble inside the glass gather. Watch how small the initial inflation is. Blow too hard, and you'll create thin spots that'll crack during cooling. The skill lies in maintaining even wall thickness while expanding the form. Between blowing stages, the piece gets reheated in a smaller furnace called a glory hole, necessary because glass cools quickly and becomes rigid. The glass blower uses various hand tools that haven't changed much since Venetian artisans perfected them in the Renaissance. Wooden paddles to flatten, metal jacks to create openings, and shears to trim excess glass. What's remarkable is the timing. The craftsman has perhaps 60 to 90 seconds of working time before the glass becomes too stiff, requiring another trip to the glory hole. Every movement must be deliberate and practiced. This is where decades of experience show, knowing exactly when the glass has the right viscosity for shaping, sensing temperature by color and feel. The finishing process involves carefully transferring the piece from the blowpipe to a pontil rod, allowing work on what was previously attached to the pipe. That final break-off moment is critical. Done wrong, and hours of work shatters. Finally comes annealing, slow, controlled cooling in a special oven over many hours. This relieves internal stresses that would otherwise cause the piece to spontaneously crack.